Okay, it is noon, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm Hillary Patterson. I'm the Community Planning Director with the City of Coeur d'Alene. And online, we have Diana Painter with Painter Preservation. She's our consultant. And we have Alexis Matrone and Jason Tipiconic-Fox from State Historic Preservation Office. So the three of us will be presenting, and so we'll have opportunity for comments as well, and wanted to hear from those of you in the room. And we also have members of our Historic Preservation Commission here. If you guys can raise your hands, and Steve here as well. So we're missing a few, they may trickle in. But a little bit about our Historic Preservation Commission. It was formed in 2019. And as we became a new commission, we also were able to become a certified local government. So that allows us to apply for and receive grant funds to do historic preservation efforts such as this with the historic survey. We did our historic preservation plan. We've done work in the Garden District neighborhood. And so we're very grateful to have that designation and the ability to receive the funds. I'm very grateful to our partners at SHPO, which is the State Historic Preservation Office, for working with us and helping provide guidance and technical assistance in the funding. The commission works to preserve our rich history and the unique character of the City of Coeur d'Alene by promoting, educating, and helping to protect our historic resources. So that's kind of the gist of that. And the effort today is we're going to go over the work that was done by Diana. Reconnaissance Survey it's a survey of the built environment to assess the overall characteristics of the area and identify historic resources and to inform future discussions about possible future historic districts. It does not affect property rights. It does not designate historic property. So it's just kind of a little caveat there. For this effort, the budget was $16,000. So $11,000 of that came from the certified local government grant funds, and then $5,000 cash match from the city. So that is the overview of that. I'm going to hand it over to SHPO for them to provide some remarks, and then Diana will give her presentation. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. As Hillary already said, my name is Alexis Matrone. I am the CLG Coordinator and Preservation Planner with SHPO. I'll pass it off to Jason and let him introduce himself. But in 2024, Coeur d'Alene applied and was awarded for a grant to complete this survey. So it's kind of a long process, and we're just at the tail end of it. But really, the survey is just to and I don't want to repeat everything that Hillary just said, but to document and better understand the historic landscape of areas across Idaho. In this case, we're doing the commercial downtown core of Coeur d'Alene. So it is just an attempt to understand, to better understand the changes over time and to document those. And it in no way, puts any designation over any of these properties or this area. It is 100% just documenting the past and the changes of the architectural landscape in downtown Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah, and I'm Jason Tipiconic-Fox again. I'm the National Register Coordinator at SHPO. Along with Alexis, I also review these surveys that are generated by our certified local government partners. I would just like to say this survey, Diana has done excellent work here, and this is kind of our new model moving forward about how we organize this survey information. So we're really excited about this project, and we know it's going to serve the City of Coeur d'Alene well as they seek to understand a part of the community that has been, changing, and, understand the historic resources are there and what the different options might be. Again, it doesn't commit the city or the community to any particular course of action, but it's a great exercise in gathering information, and we're very pleased with the results. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, Diana, are you ready to proceed?
Oh,
I can
yeah,
advance your slides when you're ready.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Sure. There we go.
This is our survey area, and later on in the process, you'll see the subset of the survey area, which was a recommended district, and that's just a recommendation. It will, it's if the city moves forward, it will be, I'm sure have a robust public process associated with. So anyway, but you'll see that later. This is the survey area, and as you can see, it focuses on the heart of downtown and then takes a meander to some of the more outlying areas. So go ahead. You can advance it. Oh, thank you. Hey, Hillary, could you explain what this map is, please?
Sure. So this is a map showing the downtown. It's kind of a heat map. And so the darker colors represent taller buildings. And so this is really kind of the core of the downtown area. So the darkest, as I mentioned, are the towers, and then everything that's lighter color would be the shorter buildings. Can you go to the next slide?
And do you want to go ahead on this one too, Hillary?
Yeah, I'm happy to do this one as well. So the red boundary is the survey area that Diana showed you on the slide two ahead of this one. The blue areas are two existing historic districts in the city. So the Garden District is formerly a historic district listed in the National Register of Historic Places. And so is Fort Sherman. And so Fort Sherman is the Fort Grounds neighborhood, as well as some of the properties on NIC's campus, shown there in blue. So that this is important just to kind of see how those boundaries line up. Back to you, Diana.
Okay. This just gets you a little bit oriented with a bird's eye kind of map. There's 4th and Sherman, which is really historically and today the heart of the commercial area downtown. So go ahead. And this is the schedule that we've followed. We had our kickoff meeting a little more than a year ago. And then the field survey started in October. The survey data was uploaded to ICRIS, the state's database, in January, and a draft survey report was submitted in March, and now we're at the final public meeting a little more than a year later. So it's been a long process, actually. So go ahead. And these are some of the documents that the city already has in place that at least helped me get oriented towards Coeur d'Alene in general. And there's been some, good work done in the past. They started with the Sherman Avenue corridor plan in '87. So it was quite some time ago, and it's a nice plan. What do you call it? It has a good shelf life. It has had a good shelf life. And then the city has a number of design guidelines that have been developed over time for infill and downtown and commercial design guidelines, and we'll make recommendations about that later. And then the historic preservation plan done in 2021. It's a really, really good document. I encourage everyone to read it. It's maybe not everyone is so geeky as I am about reading plans, but it's really good. And the goal number 1 is really the one that speaks most directly to this process, which is to identify and document Coeur d'Alene's historic and cultural resources. And it explains the importance of survey work. Survey work's really the first step in any kind of historic preservation process. So go ahead. And this is you can see it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that the preservation plan pointed out. And really the heart of it in terms of what we've just been working on is the fact that there's a lot of development pressure downtown. And that's one reason to get good documentation of your historic and other resources. So that was really helped drive this particular process. So go ahead. And these are some excerpts from the existing plans. Like I said, there's been a lot of work done and some really good work done. The corridor, got the wrong date on this, sorry. Points out some improvements that could be made and to a commercial building, historic commercial building downtown. And also just some kind of vocabulary, like what they call a bulkhead here is, you see people use different words for some of these things, and that is sort of normal in the world of architectural history. So anyway, so the Sherman Avenue corridor plan, he provided some guidance, and the other thing that existing plans have pointed out is the work that the commission has been doing, or maybe a committee of the commission, and informing themselves as to what other communities have been doing to develop downtown design guidelines and standards. This particular page from Kalispell features.
Oh, Ryan, I think, is it
Hmm?
showing Kalispell yet? Because on our end, it's showing our current downtown design guidelines. That show Kalispell on your screen.
Oh, did it not advance?
On ours, what we can see is still the downtown design guidelines for Coeur d'Alene. Is that not what's showing on your screen?
We are also seeing the downtown design guidelines.
Okay. The Kalispell one is coming up, Diana. This one is still Coeur d'Alene's.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I get what you're saying now.
Okay. I
Okay.
just want to make sure. Since we're having a
Yeah,
little
carry on. Well,
glitch. Okay.
this page shows, points out some of the buildings you'll all be familiar with downtown that have some really nice features, and this particular guideline has to do with protecting those outstanding features. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Huh.
Does this one show up on your end for the work that was done in the city? It was looking at kind of the central business district. So in 1979, of evaluating what buildings were in the downtown, and it kind of took an inventory of like how tall they were and what businesses were in each of those locations. Go to
So,
this next one, Diana. This one, you see this one with the photo from 1979?
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So this is showing the city in 1979, which is close to the date in the previous map that was done in the survey from that era. And the circles point out the existing buildings that are listed in the National Register, which are the Old City Hall, the Federal Building, and
Masonic Temple.
thank you. Yes. So that's what we're looking at here. And this is the survey from 1988. It was really well done, a lot of documentation. And what it was the reason it was particularly valuable for this this process is it shows really how much has been done in the downtown to reinstate some of the historic features of the existing buildings. So this is the same building currently and in 1988, and you can see some funky something or another that they did to that. took it down, and it much better display of its historic features. The building on the right's been redone, but the building on the left, you can see the upper level there. It's got the arched windows that are historical. So, and then on the left, I'm sorry, this is so light, but it just copies that way. This is shows the documentation that was done, the narrative documentation in that survey. So go ahead. And this shows our current survey forms, which are downloaded from the state's database called ICRIS. And it's a reconnaissance survey form, although it does have a little bit of historical background on it. The first part, you can see that kind of fat paragraph is a brief description of the building, and then the bullets are what they call character defining features. And those are not just positive features, but sometimes negative features, depends on the building. It's just, so it's not always what we hope to preserve on the building. It's just kind of what stands out about it. And I'm not going to read this, but the verbiage on the left there shows kind of an overview of what these forms show. And that's the Art Spirit Gallery in the photograph. So go ahead.
Did you want to mention anything on the left side, Diana, about just kind of some of the other things that as part of when you're evaluating each unique building, that you kind of have to go through that to look at, like, is it individually unique or eligible to be listed, or is it contributing? I don't know if you wanted to go into any of that or if that'll come up later.
I haven't talked about the statement of significance later, so I'll make a mention here. But a reconnaissance survey records the physical appearance of a building, and that's what's meant by the reconnaissance. This one has a little bit of brief history. Some cities and states do that, and some don't. But technically speaking, the most important thing about this kind of survey is defining the features and recording the appearance. Oh, I guess I do mention briefly, but that this survey form, which you'll see the other pages next and the next slide, identifies the significance and analyze the integrity. The integrity is a function of, let me see if I'll get it right. It's the location, setting, design, workmanship, materials, feeling, and association. And so in order to retain integrity, a building has to retain most of those aspects, not necessarily all of them. So 4 or more out of 7. So that analysis is also in the forms, then that paragraph on the left there. And that's just a better picture of the Art Spirit Gallery. Sorry about the big car in front of it. And then the content from the survey is input as data fields in the survey form. So could you go back one? I'll see if I forgot anything.
Yeah, no problem.
Also, we talk about the construction history, sometimes referring back to historical maps, or sometimes you can spot changes just from experience in working with buildings in general, and identify the material styles, architects and our builders if we know that, and that is input into the form. And then at least 2 photos, and sometimes a historic photo has been put into the database. So the general public has access to that database, right? That's public information. Hillary, do you?
Yes, so
Alexa.
as soon as the survey is complete and we complete it on our side, the public will have complete access to all of this data, and data across Idaho. ICRIS is access. Anybody from the public could access data throughout all of ICRIS.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
So are there any questions about how this form is used?
Nope, doesn't look like it. I'll go to the next slide for
Okay.
you, Diana.
So this gives you an idea of what we will be going over briefly in the survey report. This historic overview is the eras of growth are borrowed from the historic context that was part of the preservation plan. And then what I added here were the number of resources in every category that were found in the survey area. And so you can see there's only 3 really early resources in Coeur d'Alene. And the greatest number is the period from 1901 to 1928, which was labeled City Growth in Progress, with 48 resources in the preservation plan and as part of this study. And then you can see kind of tapered down, so to speak, during the Depression and World War II, the number of resources declined, which is not uncommon, especially during the Depression. And then the post-war boom and city expansion with 21 resources. It depends on the place, how much post-war boom influenced the downtown core, because oftentimes this is a period where expansion takes place kind of outside the historic core, and that is what happened in Coeur d'Alene for the most part. And then 1980 to the present, we are not addressing, I mean, we survey the resources, but we're not addressing that particular period in terms of preservation because it's a modern time frame, and usually we incorporate into a historic district buildings that are 50 years or older as a norm. And this particular study was done in 2021, so that's why it ends in 2021, so to speak. So go ahead. And this just shows the breadth of resources that were considered when we did the survey. They start with the 1890 with the Presbyterian Church in its first phase. So that's the oldest resource. And then the newest resource, or a new resource that is also 50 years old, is what's that, Idaho State Bank? Is that the name of that bank? Anyway, you can see it here on the slide.
Great.
So go ahead. And I just put in one sample historic map here. And this is to illustrate, this one illustrates a 1921 map, which corresponds to the census. As you can see from the census numbers here, 1900 through 1950, Coeur d'Alene really made a big leap between 1900 and 1910, which is also the case for Spokane, which is where I live. That is a really heavy period of growth. And then it declined slightly between 1910 and 1920. And I have to say, I don't know enough about the specific history of Coeur d'Alene to know why that little bump or decline happened. But then it bumped right up again in 1930 and continues to grow, as you know. But this map shows 1921, and what you can see here, that you don't have a before and after, but what it illustrates is, for example, the middle block on the top with the little houses. It shows that this area, the commercial area was, commercial buildings occupied the core, but surrounding that core was a pretty healthy neighborhood of residences, single-family residences. The upper left there is the Presbyterian Church. And then 4 blocks or block faces along Sherman in this particular year show that the transition had been made from mostly frame buildings, wood frame buildings, to the brick that you see there now. So that had made a pretty complete transformation into a brick downtown and a compact downtown. So go ahead. And there's this section is a little bit on what kind of buildings were found in the survey area, and all of these, and these are not in Coeur d'Alene, these particular two, but they were good illustrations of traditional storefronts. The common, yeah, pre-1950 mostly. There's Coeur d'Alene. But could you go back for a sec? I just want to point out one thing.
Yeah.
So these are from another place, but they're typical. So the one on the left is a traditional pre-1950 and pre-1900 even storefront where you have a recessed opening and display windows across the front, and the door is glazed, and you've got the transom windows trying to throw some light into the back of the shop. And there's that bulkhead feature, which is also called a kick plate. So this is a very typical storefront. I think you'll recognize this form all over the Downtown Coeur there. And the one on the right is just another version of a older looking storefront, although I have a feeling it's the one that's been redone, although it might have cast iron posts there, columns. Anyway, so this is a couple of variations on what you can find in a traditional storefront. And so next slide. And this is how it looks in Coeur d'Alene. It's the Sherman, of course. And these are all what they call party wall structures. So the buildings typically fill the footprint of the lot, or at least the front and sides of the lot. And and they're separate buildings, but they're directly adjacent to each other. So this is your basic pre-1950 look in a downtown, and Coeur d'Alene's is pretty intact. These are called, the one-story buildings are called oh, I hate that when your mind just goes blank. It's a one-part commercial block, which means that it's one story and the retail storefront occupies the majority of that frontage there. And you can see the two-story building kind of at the end of this block, that's called a two-part commercial block. And those are types. They don't reference any particular architectural style, but it's a way that architectural historians have to talk about commercial buildings from this era. So go ahead. And this is a modern commercial building. I think it's 1969. It's the credit union. And those are oftentimes can be surrounded by parking, but the more character defining feature here is that they're freestanding. They're not abutted with one another. So that is just one characteristic of a modern commercial building. So go ahead. And this is another type yet again. It's and these are auto-oriented buildings that are defined oftentimes by the ample parking and a drive-through or basic auto-oriented auto access buildings. And all of these buildings in downtown Coeur d'Alene have the ability or the potential to be historic. And I'm just showing the different forms that can be found in Coeur d'Alene and a lot of historic downtowns for that matter. So those are the kind of big picture differences between different eras that you can see in our survey area in Coeur d'Alene. And can you look at that gas? It's $2.26 a gallon. I think that's what it says. I couldn't believe it when I saw that. So go ahead. And this is just a brief little section on some trends I'm sure you'll be familiar with, but here on the left is a historic house. It shows one of the few, less than a handful, of houses that are left in the downtown survey area today. So this particular house has good integrity and nicely designed, and so it's considered historic as well. And then another trend that took place a little bit on the north end, towards the north. Is that right? Is this north of the lake? Yeah. So this is the craft brewery or crafted brewery, and there was a trend along with residential neighborhoods in this area earlier on. There were also more, I call them light industrial. I don't know what other people would say, but like gas stations, like this one was a gas station, the part of the building on the right. Gas stations and garages and warehouses, storage buildings, that kind of thing. And they've been, a lot have been redone, rehabbed in modern times to be more pedestrian friendly and accommodate retail uses and service uses. And that is the case with the brewery here. So go ahead. And another recent trend that you all know about is the trend towards building towers in the downtown. And I see I was looking at the some of the work that's been done from this working group. They've really done a lot of work to study this and evaluate it for what the future is going to hold. But one of these efforts here, this is the working group update 25, was to incorporate historic preservation perspective in the downtown, and that's what you're doing now. And these are goals from the plan. Well, it's not a plan, but it's an update. But some of the activities that the group has undertaken. So go ahead. Here's Kalispell. I don't know what I was thinking. So this is another thing that the group has done is taken design guidelines or historic district or historic design guidelines from all over and studied and analyzed them. So this is a really valuable effort that they put together in this update. So go ahead. And so this is an outcome of the survey. We took the survey area, and which is the green diagram down there, and then took the survey information and mapped it. And my scanner does not like pastel colors, so that's why this just looks like a bunch of little dots without a background. But you can still tell what's going on here. The green is historic and the red is not historic. So you can see, like on Sherman Avenue here, between 5th and 6th, I think, how there's a cluster of green or contributing buildings, and in other, you can see other blocks where there's a lot of historic integrity in some of these little clusters. So go ahead. And this is a recommendation for a historic building or district that came out of the process. And like I said, this is just a recommendation. You will be, if the city goes forward with this, I'm sure they'll be doing a lot of outreach and a lot of further study of this proposal. But this is the concept that came out of the survey. So, and you can see, now you can see the blocks where the cluster between, I think, 5th and 6th there, so a bunch of green or contributing buildings. And you can also follow kind of the older, more intact areas in Coeur d'Alene because they are flank Sherman Avenue. And you can see that pretty readily on this diagram. So we'll go ahead. So these are some ideas that came out of the survey, and you guys will be, and I'll have Hillary chime in here in a minute. What your next steps will be. One thing you can do is you can go forward with looking at it more carefully at a historic district, and you want a historic district with boundaries that meet the MPS standards, and there's a lot of background on there as why that's a pretty good idea. And then also what your community wants, and that's huge. That's comes out of every process like this is a lot of community outreach and community public outreach. And then if you go forward with that, another thing you can do is make sure that the design guidelines address the Secretary of Interior standards, which is the federal government's the standards that they put out, and there's several types that helps guide historic development. And many cities take the Secretary of Interior standards and tailor them to their particular city through their design guidelines, and that's the way that they implement those standards. And the Historic Preservation Act was passed in 1966, so there's some history of that, those standards being refined and implemented over a pretty robust period of time. So that's another reason they're kind of tried and true, the standards. And usually cities implement the standards for rehabilitation, which is just one of the standards, but it's the most liberal. And then the city can also make sure that the infill standards address the historic district, and standards number 9 and 10. There are 10 standards in particular address new construction. So those are just some recommendations. They're pretty standard recommendations that came out of the survey process. And I will turn it over to Hillary, and maybe she can give some additional insight on next steps for the city.
Thanks, Diana. That was great. And we'll allow for questions in just a minute. But yes, this is really helpful for the city and for our Historic Preservation Commission just to kind of inform on like what are the existing resources. And then this will help with our effort that, as was mentioned, we have a working group. So the city staff is working with an ad hoc committee and looking at the Downtown Coeur for development regulations and design guidelines. And so this is also helpful for kind of looking at what exists currently And then, as you mentioned, looking at Secretary of Interior standards, I think Kalispell has followed that, Boise has that in some of their historic districts. So, what does that look like with our design guidelines for new construction? But at this point, it's really just, this is informational for us. And we don't have any plans to do a historic district. That could come up as a recommendation of the commission. This is just kind of the first step in this process. That we have talked about. If we did a historic district, maybe it'd be local and then you kind of create your own format and you don't have to go through the long process of going through the National Register of Historic Places. But it does sound like there's some benefits if we did it through the National Register of Historic Places related to historic tax credits. So that's something that SHPO may want to weigh in on. And I think with that, I'll see if Alexis or Jason wants to add anything that would be helpful for the commission or the community to hear about just kind of this reconnaissance survey in general and what you would see as next steps or your recommendations.
Yeah, do you mind going back just one slide, if possible?
Sure.
So, yes, thank you. So one of the point of a reconnaissance survey is to document that entire survey area. One of the things that Diana explained comes out of this is a recommended or proposed district boundary. So Diana documented all of the properties within the larger area and then made this recommendation looking at the changes. And she mentioned the terms contributing and not contributing. So we just kind of wanted to make sure that everybody understood what those terms actually mean in all of this. So the green dots are what would be considered contributing to that potential district. These evaluations are done by looking at the Secretary of the Interior standards that are set by the National Park Service. And it's just looking at those changes made over time, the materials. There's a lot of characteristics that go into these determinations, and they could be kind of fluid. And, we went back and forth on some of them. Some of them are very obvious. Some of them are a bit more difficult to really get into there. We have to get into the nitty gritty of the changes to make those determinations. And then the red dots are what would not be contributing to that district. And that just means sometimes they're out of period. They might be from the 80s, 90s, even sooner or even more recent. They could have just undergone too many changes where they no longer have that same integrity or follow those same historic characteristics, where they're not contributing. That being said, they can one day become contributing again. And that's why in this documentation, in ICRIS, you could see the changes that we describe over time. And if we can, we always say, if this change is made, it would then be contributing. We try to be as detailed as possible, but that information can come with ongoing research into all of this. So we just wanted everyone to better understand what that contributing and not contributing status really means in all of this. And then I guess if we talk about next steps, usually what we recommend, and this is all up to the city, the commission, and the public of Coeur d'Alene, is moving towards a National Register listed district. A National Register listed district puts no restrictions, no protections on any of these properties. It is simply an honorific designation. It says, great job, you have a historic property. And it really, usually what we see is it boosts that community support for that historic area. But it does open up all of these commercial businesses that are still contributing, all of those green dots, to possibly being able to utilize the historic tax credits. I'll let Jason, he's far more knowledgeable about the tax credits, but that's another big benefit of a national listed district. And then, as Hillary said, there is a local district aspect to it, which is a whole other conversation, and the city would decide if they would want to do that. But that's where those design guidelines come back in that Diana spoke about, where there are, different requirements set on that district. So I'll let Jason take over and talk about the tax credits.
Can I just say one thing before we go to Jason?
Mhm.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that to be contributing or historic, as a layperson might say, you don't always, the building doesn't always have to reflect the fact that it was built in 1900, say. It doesn't have to go back that far, but changes are need to be over 50 years old to be for the building to be considered contributing. So it's not a hard and fast. It doesn't have to look totally original. You could have a storefront that we've redone in the 1950s, and it's a great example of a 1950s storefront, and it's intact for the period it was redeveloped in, and that can also be contributing. So you're not, it's the rules aren't quite as hard and fast as this might imply. So go ahead,
Yeah.
Jason.
Yeah, I think that's
I
a
got
great
a quick
point.
question.
Jason, can we have a question from
Yeah, yeah,
our
absolutely.
attendees before? Okay, yeah, go ahead, John.
So I have two of the buildings, or three of them actually. One of them is contributing and two say it's not contributing. Can I see those reports to say it's not contributing? Because I think I'd argue that they're very much contributing to the historic nature of downtown.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to somehow whisper those addresses to Hillary real quick and she could put them in the chat, we could pull those up on iCris and look at them.
Oh,
Oh,
God.
yeah.
Or we can.
Yeah, or we
Right,
could
you
follow
just-
up.
You just got me right there.
We could follow
There's
up
the one on
and
the left
send
of the depot and there's one on
determinations to
Coeur d'Alene
Hillary.
Avenue.
Okay, hold on, we can look it up really fast, isn't it?
And my question is that I think they do contribute to the historic nature of downtown, and you would hate to put them in a yes or no category for
So-
what we're talking about for historic district.
Yes.
That's kind of
and-
more my thing is if we're angling towards, if somebody's actually angling towards the historic nature of something, putting them in a no category when they're obviously trying to do that. I just think you don't want to paint a picture that somebody's going to refer to later as no, when maybe it's yes.
No, absolutely. And, let's preface this by saying there are many, many properties that Jason and I and the rest of the SHPO staff, we sit down as a team to review these, look at, and would love to say, this is contributing to a district. Unfortunately, we have to follow those National Park Service guidelines on making these designations. So all of that is to say that even though it didn't quite hit those and the Park Service can be very strict on these things, even if it isn't following those, we can't fit it into contributing because of the Park Service standards. It doesn't take away from the historic significance of Coeur d'Alene and that importance. There might just be some changes, some materials, whatever it may be. I don't know what properties we're talking about that just didn't check certain boxes. So we weren't able to say yes or no. And I know that the yes or no boxes and putting it on a list can seem like we're taking away from the overall historic significance. And that's not what we're trying to do in any way. This is simply, we just have to follow those Park Service standards and guidelines. And sometimes it just doesn't fit with something that has happened over time. I will also say that we try very hard to always go into these determinations by saying yes and working our way backwards. We don't ever want to say no. But once Hillary is able to send us these addresses, and we could do this offline, we could pull up those determinations and then send them back to Hillary, and she could give you that update. And feel free to share our contact information, and we don't mind, having a phone call or looking into this more, to maybe we can look at it again and just double check,
Yeah, no, I just think
can-
too, as a city, we have to be careful not to label something right here, right now, yes or no, because we know we're gonna live with it. When maybe it's
And-
somewhere in between, but you know how things are these days, somebody's gonna label it and then you're gonna be stuck there. And if we're talking about height restrictions or we're talking about buildings or what's historic, what's not, like
Yeah.
we're gonna live with that. That's kind of more my thing, like, because some of these standards, because a couple of those you have is yes on there, I would argue are probably no. If you really look at the work that's been done to them, I'm not going to say which ones, but Anyway, I just think we just need to be careful on yes or no if the city's gonna live with this information from here on out.
Well,
Well,
I would like to add something here. Is that when we did the historic, when you do the survey, it's a pretty brief look at the building, and the historic profile that it's in the survey forms, it's also a pretty brief look at the building. And if you have information on your building and what's happened to it over time, it definitely should talk to the city and maybe the SHPO about it, because these they're not in-depth surveys, they're reconnaissance surveys. And a really good example, again, is the Art Spirit Gallery, because it looked abysmal a number of years ago. It was really funky if you look at the 1988 survey, but somebody restored it, and I don't know whose building it is, but you know, if you look at that, if you just look at it in a photograph, it's like, wow, that's a great historic building. But it actually has very little historic fabric, what they call historic fabric. The materials have been changed out, but they've been changed out in a really appropriate way, appropriate for the look of downtown. So I'd encourage anybody to talk to the city and maybe the SHPO as well, because you may know things that we don't
John,
about your building.
John, I'm aware, this is Walter Burns. Obviously, we're aware of what buildings you're talking about, and I think we can work with you to try to figure that out, and I understand exactly where you're coming from.
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Are there other questions before Jason talks about the tax credits and that aspect? No? Okay, Jason, go ahead.
Well, sure. And I would just kind of second what Diana said in her last response. And another thing is, you know, if a particular property owner is wanting to know how their property could become contributing, we can always look at that building and look at work that could be done to enhance its historic character. And these determinations are not static. You know, this is a living sort of process, and things change. And in addition to additional information, you know, work could happen to enhance some of those things. So I would just emphasize that. And I would also emphasize that I think I can speak for Diana here, and certainly at SHPO, that our process, we try to be as fair and consistent as possible in evaluating every single resource in the downtown. The same standard is applied to everybody. But again, we're always happy to revisit these determinations should a need arise. On another point, I would also add, in terms of thinking about potential next steps for the community, that, you know, this survey project has evaluated the buildings in sort of two different ways. The first is whether they are individually eligible for listing in the National Register, or whether they are contributing to a district, such as this downtown district, or both. So when something is determined individually eligible, and we do have a number of resources in downtown that were determined to have that status, that simply means they have a higher level of architectural or historic significance that we knew about, at least at the time of this survey. Again, you know, this is sort of just a very quick snapshot of downtown, and additional information could mean that other properties fall into that individual listing category. But it's just something to keep in mind, because if perhaps there's not a desire immediately to move forward with a larger historic district, maybe you just focus on individually listing some properties, and you could do that either at the National Register level or the local level. So there's just lots of options here. And that's really one of the things that we were just really pleased with seeing from the data that Diana has assembled, is Coeur d'Alene really has almost all of the options available in terms of which way you could proceed next. We could go with this kind of larger historic district. There could be a smaller historic district of some size, or again, there could be some individual buildings that are designated in some way. So you just have a lot of options on your menu, and that's a great place to be as a community. There's just a lot of ways to move forward at this time. In terms of the tax credits, the National Register listing of downtown as a district would open up the property owners within that area that are to a financial incentive that's run through the National Park Service to kind of offset some of the costs of doing work on their buildings in a way that would enhance and preserve their historic character. And when you designate a big downtown, it just sort of saves the property owners a step in that process and kind of opens them up to that financial incentive. So if you have property owners that are thinking about, remodeling their storefront, there's a way you could use the tax credits to do that. If you have a 2-story building where maybe the first floor is a store and the second floor is not being used at this time, that's a way to get some incentive to kind of bring that second floor back into use, some sort of income producing purpose. So that's just another option on the menu, but kind of one of the things to consider in terms of whether you go with a National Register designation or not. So.
Questions from commission members or audience?
Walter Burns again. I know you have designated certain buildings that you feel like are individually eligible in this report, correct?
Yes, Diana has. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but there were a number of individually eligible buildings downtown that are not yet listed in the National Register.
That includes your main one, John.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna send you over their 2 addresses.
Yeah, that'd be great. I saw the one was, I think, 215 East Lakeside, but
Yeah, the other one's 216 Coeur d'Alene.
okay. Great.
Is it not 215 East Lakeside?
It is. It's 215 East Lakeside and 216 East Coeur d'Alene Avenue. They were both built in the 40s. Along with, I think, the one that's at the end of the street over there, John Butler's building, that's got a green dot on it. So anyway, we don't need to talk about it here. It's not really worth talking about. But my thing, again, I'm just going to go back to that. We're doing a lot of things with this working group downtown here. And I just don't want to see a report be able to be used against us with a bunch of red dots on something that are actually contributing to the historic nature of downtown. But the yes, no thing says that they're not. That's really, it's kind of more of a bigger picture thinking here. So
I think both of those buildings, I understand what you're saying. I think both of them we could maybe take another look at.
yeah, that's cool.
Other questions or comments?
If you give me those addresses too,
Oh, yes.
I can do a little
Okay,
forensic deep dive,
okay. We appreciate
see
it.
what we can find.
Thank you. And yes, thank you to Mr. Shepherd here has done a lot of research and that's been helpful for Diana, and Diana's done a ton of work on this. So we're very appreciative of everything that's been put into this survey. It is a lot of work. And there was one property I was asking SHPO about, like, why isn't that one? That one should be contributing. Like, it's great. They're like, no, we agree. It's great. It's fantastic for downtown and it's preserved the building and it's been adaptive reuse, but it doesn't meet, the 6 criteria or whatever there was from the National Park Service. So it is, yeah.
And another, aspect of this is we have been mentioning that, we could also look at a local historic district. If we would look at that with a very different eye of, but not only what the building looks like it is now, but how it contributed to the history of Coeur d'Alene and its importance along the way. So there's a number of ways we can look at things.
I think the other interesting thing, though, if we did pursue either the local or the national district, kind of like Garden District, there are a number of properties in the Garden District that also are non-contributing.
Oh, yeah.
But once you're in the boundary, you are a historic property and then you are eligible for the benefits of that.
Well, not
Yeah, I
to
just
make-
kind of want to second what Walter just said. That 100% you could go in 2 very different directions, and those are going to look at 2 very different ways. The National Register District, is really just to open the area up to those other incentives like the tax credits. But on the local level, if you do a local historic district of some kind, that is going to be viewed under a completely different lens. Than it doesn't have to follow those national park criteria. So I think that's a good thing to really drive home too, that those are going to be 2 very different things, and the planning on both beneficial, both hold great benefit, just it's 2 very different things.
Is there something keeping us from doing both?
And
No.
I don't think so, because Boise has their historic districts are both. They're
A
both
lot of
listed in the
times-
National Register and
Yes.
locally.
A lot of times the National Register district comes first, and then the city will use those boundaries to just create that overlay district for the local side of things. It doesn't have to go that way. That's just the most common way that we see it. And then even if you have, let's say we use this exact boundary for a National Register district, when you start to do the local district, you don't even have to use those boundaries, even if that's already established. That could look completely different as well. So there are many, many different options. And like Jason said earlier, you guys are in a really great spot because you have so many options right now. So there's no one way to do any of these things.
And if we formed a local district first and then wanted to do a national register district, that wouldn't restrict us from doing that either. Is that correct?
No, absolutely not. On that end, though, I will say that I think of surveys like new cars that you drive off the lot. As soon as you drive away, that car is not worth as much as it previously was, just because changes happen so quickly that right now we have the most updated information to move forward with a National Register nomination. If we do wait a year to 2 years, that information will you don't have to do the whole survey again, but you will have to invest some time and resources into updating the changes that happen within that area. So that's just another thing to note long-term planning wise.
Yeah, and the Garden District was, of course, a much larger district when we did the National Register. This is, like a fifth of the size. So it's just a kind of an easier project to contemplate as you're, making decisions about which way you want to go. It's much simpler than the Garden District was. So I would just add that.
Great. Thank you. Other questions?
Are these national guidelines easily accessible to see, if we make changes to our buildings, are we gonna get another survey before it becomes, a district? And then now we're outside of contributing because we made edits to our building. Are these guidelines easily accessible and easy to see when we go to make changes to our properties?
That's a
How would
great
you-
question.
Yeah, what kind of guidance could we provide for property owners on like, what are the kind of those criteria for kind of keeping a building so that it is contributing?
Yeah, so the Park Service does have guidelines that are accessible to everybody. I will say they're not the easiest things to read. But we can also send examples of other areas within Idaho that have local districts with those design guidelines already that kind of give, even if it's not specific to your community, the type of building, that one commercial block in this time period with this material. We could provide those too for now before the city gets to, that stage of things that may help in those decisions. I also want to say that, we always want to be accessible to the public. So anytime you are, planning on making changes, please feel free to give either me or Jason a call, and we could go over those changes and just give recommendations or best practices, before, because we do know the area, we do know what hopefully the plans will be for the future or the different ideas. So we're always here to help in that end. And then we could provide some material that should be helpful in the meantime.
I could add something here that maybe wasn't 100%. Well, I'll just say the National Register District is honorific. It doesn't require any design review. I mean, you have your design review guidelines already in place for certain things, but it doesn't require any design review unless you go after a tax credit project, and then there are stricter guidelines. But a local district, I live in Spokane, so we have maybe 4 really big local districts and a whole bunch of National Register districts, and people like National Register districts because it does make them tax credits accessible for them for contributing buildings, and there are a lot of them. But the difference between that and the local district, and they could be the same geographic area, just depends on how you set it all up, is that you have to go through design review. So if a formal design review process, just like you'd go through any planning process. And so for a local district, that's the main difference that you can see in the everyday management of the local versus national. I don't know if that was like super clear or not, but in Spokane, you can see an example of how they each work. In the local districts, the way they've set it up, their design guidelines, at least some of them are like, you have to meet like, they're totally tailored to that particular area, geographic area. And the way they set it up, which has its pros and cons, is that you have to meet like 4 out of these 6 standards or something to go forward with what you want to do with your house or whatever. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear.
Yeah, I'd like to say that, for any building owner who's going, who's looking at this information, however we decide to proceed, we're always available. The local, our local Coeur d'Alene Historic Preservation Commission are also always ready to sit down and talk to you and look at what you're talking about and help guide you through any of that, and maybe simplify some of the standards that the national,
Yeah.
The national standards that can kind of get a little obtuse sometimes. So we're here as a resource for you always.
I'm going to add one thing to that. This is Shannon Sardell, and what I can recommend is that everybody does have access to the ICRIS database. And once these items are in the database, there'll be some information about your property. You can search it by address. And that should have, from the efforts from Diana and then the State Historic Preservation Office kind of analyzing, should have character defining features that are important. And that might be important for you to protect, preserve, kind of work with if you are doing some work on the building. And those things being the most important character defining features that, when we evaluate those buildings now or in the future, if those are lost, then it loses its historic integrity. But if you're able to maintain or preserve those items, you will actually, be able to, continue to be considered historic if a survey was done in another 20 years, for example. So that'd be a really quick and easy, way that's been set up through that, Chris.
And last thing to emphasize once again, there are no restrictions on what, even if you're in a historic district, there are no restrictions as to what you can do with your building. Obviously, we would, as a commission, would love to steer you towards keeping them more historic than less so, but there is no restriction there in terms of what you can do. We're just happy to work with anyone. Help.
And then I guess it's important to point out, so there's 2 different things. We already have design guidelines for downtown. So those are in place right now. So those would affect if someone is doing alterations to their building, but they're not historic specific. If this becomes a local or national registered district, then evaluate it, because already something we're looking at currently. How do we kind of build it all in so it makes sense? It's still reasonable, light touch, but really the goal of preserving character.
We are just now, like you, getting the information from this survey, and we will be in our future meetings and future planning, looking very closely at it, deciding what directions we want to pursue, and those will be public. Anything we do in terms of a local or National Historic Register nomination will be public meetings, publicly accessible too. And our regular meetings are always publicly accessible too. So, we will be determining where we're going from here, and it's kind of be the process starting today.
Questions? Good job. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, guys.
We're delighted to have it.
No questions online, Britt or Dan or Trevor? Councilmember Miller?
No questions for me. Just excited to see all of everything kind of done and the work that's being done by everyone. And it's nice to see us going in a good direction for historic preservation. So it was a great presentation.
Okay. If there's no more questions, we can adjourn.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Jason.
Thank you.